The pattern that haunted a dynasty. There is a photograph that exists somewhere in the archives of American memory. It is fading now, the edges curling inward, the colors bleeding into sepia tones that make the past seem both more distant and somehow more present than the sharp digital images of today. In this photograph, 9 children stand in a line. They are arranged by height from tallest to smallest, dressed in the formal attire of wealthy New England families in the 1930s. The boys wear suits and ties. The girls wear dresses with careful attention to detail. They are the Kennedy children, and they are smiling for the camera with the practiced ease of people who have been taught from birth that image matters. That presentation is everything. That the face you show the world is more important than the chaos you might feel inside. If you look at this photograph long enough, if you study the faces carefully, you can see something beneath the smiles. You can see the weight of expectation already pressing down on these young shoulders. You can see the beginning of a pattern that will repeat itself across decades, across generations, across the span of American history. Joseph Jr., the eldest, stands tallest. He will die in an explosion over the English Channel during World War II, volunteering for a mission so dangerous that it amounts to suicide. Jack, standing second, will become president and die in Dallas, his head destroyed by bullets while his wife sits beside him. Rosemary, smiling, but with something different in her eyes, something that her father will decide needs to be fixed, needs to be controlled, will undergo a lobotomy that will destroy her mind and leave her institutionalized for the rest of her life. Kathleen, beautiful and rebellious, will die in a plane crash in France, having defied her family to marry outside the Catholic faith. Robert, earnest and competitive, will die in a hotel kitchen in Los Angeles, shot while campaigning to become president, repeating his brother's fate with cruel precision. Ted, the youngest boy, will survive into old age, but will carry the weight of Chappaquiddick, of political failure, of being the last brother standing in a family that seems designed to destroy itself. And the daughters, Patricia, Jean, Eunice, will watch all of this unfold, will bury their brothers one by one, will carry the grief of repetition, will wonder what it means to be born into a family where tragedy arrives not as an aberration, but as a pattern. This photograph, with its 9 smiling children, is a document of futures not yet known. It is a snapshot of innocence before experience. It is the moment before the pattern reveals itself. And if you believe in such things, if you allow yourself to see patterns where others see only random tragedy, you might call this photograph evidence of something else. Evidence of what people would come to call the Kennedy curse. To understand the pattern, you must first understand the man who set it in motion. Joseph Patrick Kennedy Sr. was not born into wealth, but he was born into hunger. The kind of psychological hunger that can never be satisfied, that grows more intense with each achievement, that transforms every success into merely a stepping stone toward the next conquest. He was born in 1888 in Boston, the son of Irish Catholic immigrants who had climbed from poverty into modest respectability. But modest respectability was not enough. Not for Joseph. He looked at the WASP establishment of Boston, the old money families who controlled banking and politics and social access, and he understood that he would never be accepted by them. His Catholicism, his Irish heritage, his lack of generational wealth, these were barriers that could not be crossed through simple achievement. And so he made a decision that would echo across generations. If he could not be accepted into the American aristocracy, he would create his own dynasty. He would accumulate so much wealth, so much power, so much influence that his family would become American aristocracy. He would transform the Kennedy name from Irish immigrant stock into something that commanded respect, that opened doors, that positioned his children at the highest levels of American society. He pursued this goal with single-minded intensity. He made money through whatever means were available: banking, bootlegging during Prohibition, Hollywood production, stock market speculation. The methods were sometimes questionable, sometimes outright unethical, but the results were undeniable. By the 1920s, Joseph Kennedy was one of the wealthiest men in America. But wealth alone was not sufficient for what he wanted to build. He needed to position his children correctly. He needed to groom them for greatness. He needed to ensure that the Kennedy name would be associated not just with money, but with power, with culture, with political leadership. And so he constructed a machinery of expectation. His children were not simply loved and nurtured. They were shaped, molded, prepared for the roles he had determined they would play. Joseph Jr., the eldest son, would be president. The other children would support this goal, would position themselves around Joseph Jr. like planets around a sun, their individual desires subordinated to the family mission. The cost of this machinery was enormous. The Kennedy children grew up in an environment of constant competition, constant pressure, constant awareness that love and approval were conditional, that you earned your place in the family through achievement, through winning, through never showing weakness. Rose Kennedy, the mother, enforced this system with rigid discipline. She was cold, distant, more concerned with proper behavior and social positioning than with emotional nurturing. The children learned early that vulnerability was dangerous, that feelings were to be controlled rather than expressed, that the image you presented to the world was infinitely more important than the person you actually were. What Joseph Kennedy Sr. did not understand, or perhaps understood but did not care about, was that he was constructing a family structure that was fundamentally unstable. He was creating a system in which his children would be driven to take enormous risks, to push themselves beyond normal limits, to sacrifice their own well-being for the sake of family ambition. He was building, in other words, the conditions for tragedy. Joseph Kennedy Jr. was the golden child. Handsome, athletic, charismatic, intelligent. He embodied everything his father wanted in an heir. He was groomed from birth for the presidency. His education was carefully managed. His social positioning was strategic. His every move was calculated to prepare him for the role he was destined to play. And then World War II arrived, and with it, an opportunity for the kind of heroism that could enhance a political resume. Joseph Jr. volunteered for the Navy. He became a bomber pilot. He flew dangerous missions over Europe. He was building the kind of war record that would be invaluable in a political career. But it was not enough. His younger brother Jack had also served in the war and had become a genuine hero after the PT-19 incident. Joseph Jr., always competitive, always needing to be first, could not accept being overshadowed. He needed a more dramatic act of heroism. He needed something that would definitively establish him as the family hero. In August 1944, he volunteered for Operation Aphrodite, a mission so dangerous that it was essentially experimental. The plan was to fly a bomber loaded with explosives toward a German target, then parachute out before the plane, guided by remote control, crashed into the target. It was barely controlled suicide, the kind of mission that rational people declined. But Joseph Jr. was not operating from a place of rationality. He was operating from a place of desperate need to prove himself, to exceed his brother's achievements, to fulfill the destiny his father had constructed for him. The plane exploded prematurely. Joseph Jr. was vaporized. There was nothing left to bury. The golden child, the heir to the Kennedy dynasty, the one who was supposed to be president, he was simply gone. For Joseph Kennedy Sr., this was more than the death of a son. It was the collapse of the entire structure he had spent decades building. Everything had been oriented around Joseph Jr.'s eventual presidency. The other children were supporting players. The family machinery was designed to elevate Joseph Jr. to the White House. And suddenly, that future was impossible. The careful planning, the strategic positioning, the decades of preparation, all of it was rendered meaningless in a single explosion over the English Channel. This is where the pattern truly begins, not with Joseph Jr.'s death itself, but with Joseph Sr.'s response to it. Rather than reconsidering his approach, rather than recognizing that the machinery he had built was dangerous, he simply recalibrated. If Joseph Jr. could not be president, then Jack would be president. The ambition would not die. The dynasty would continue. The sacrifice of one son would not derail the family mission. He looked at Jack, the second son, the one who had been sick throughout childhood, the one who had been deemed less suitable for the presidency, and he made a decision. You will be president now. You will fulfill the destiny that was meant for your brother. You will carry forward the Kennedy name. And Jack, carrying his own wounds, his own need for paternal approval, His own complex relationship with family expectation accepted this burden. He stepped into the role that had been designed for someone else. He became the instrument of his father's ambition. The machinery continued. The pattern had begun. We have already explored the deaths of Jack and Robert in previous episodes, but what is important to understand here is not simply the individual tragedies, but the pattern they created. The sense that the Kennedy family was marked by something beyond normal misfortune. When Jack was assassinated in 1963, the nation grieved, but the grief was complicated by a sense of shock. Presidents had been assassinated before: Lincoln, Garfield, McKinley, but not in the modern era, not in the age of television and Secret Service protection, not in a time when such violence was supposed to be impossible. The assassination created a mythology around Jack Kennedy. He became in death something larger than he had been in life. The flaws were forgotten. The mistakes were erased. What remained was the image. The young, charismatic president cut down in his prime, the symbol of lost possibility, the embodiment of a future that would never arrive. And then 5 years later, Robert was killed, and the shock transformed into something else, into a recognition that this was not simply random misfortune. This was a pattern. This was repetition. This was the Kennedy family experiencing the same tragedy twice. People began to talk about a curse, not in a literal supernatural sense, though some did believe in such things, but in a symbolic sense. The idea that the Kennedy family was somehow marked, that their ambition carried a price, that the heights they reached made them vulnerable to catastrophic falls. The pattern seemed to confirm this belief. Two brothers, both seeking the presidency, both killed by assassins. Two brothers who had carried the weight of family expectation, both cut down before they could fully realize their potential. Two brothers whose deaths were separated by 5 years, but seemed to be variations on the same terrible theme. For the Kennedy family itself, Robert's death was almost incomprehensible. To lose one brother to assassination is devastating. To lose two is a kind of psychological terrorism. It creates the sense that the violence is not random, but targeted, that being a Kennedy means being vulnerable, that the family name itself is dangerous. Ted Kennedy, the last surviving brother, carried this burden for the rest of his life. He was haunted by the deaths of his brothers. He struggled with alcoholism and depression. He made terrible decisions, Chappaquiddick being the most infamous, that seemed to stem from the psychological damage of being the survivor, of carrying the weight of a dynasty built on sacrifice and tragedy. But the public assassinations of Jack and Robert were not the only tragedies that befell the Kennedy family. There were other deaths, other losses, other moments when the pattern revealed itself in different forms. Rosemary Kennedy was born in 1918, the third child and first daughter. As a child, she struggled intellectually and socially. She had learning difficulties. She did not develop at the same pace as her siblings. In a family where excellence was expected and weakness was unacceptable, Rosemary became a problem that Joseph Kennedy Sr. believed needed to be solved. In 1941, when Rosemary was 23 years old, Joseph made a decision that would haunt the family for generations. He arranged for her to undergo a prefrontal lobotomy, an experimental procedure that was supposed to calm her mood swings and make her more manageable. The procedure was performed without the knowledge or consent of Rose Kennedy or the other children. The lobotomy was catastrophic. It left Rosemary permanently incapacitated. She lost the ability to walk or speak coherently. She was institutionalized for the rest of her life, hidden away from public view, her existence barely acknowledged by the family until decades later, when attitudes toward disability had changed. Rosemary's tragedy was different from the assassinations. It was not violence from outside the family. It was violence perpetrated by the family itself, by a father who valued image and control more than he valued his daughter's well-being. It was the Kennedy machinery turning inward, destroying one of its own members in the service of maintaining appearances. Kathleen Kennedy, known as Kick, was the fourth child and second daughter. She was beautiful, spirited, rebellious. During World War II, she fell in love with an English aristocrat, the Marquis of Hartington. The problem was that he was Protestant. The Kennedy family, devout Catholics, was horrified. They opposed the marriage. They warned her that marrying outside the faith would mean being cut off from the family. Kik married him anyway. 4 months later, her husband was killed in combat. Kik was widowed at 24, grieving and isolated from her family, who viewed her marriage as a betrayal. 4 years later, in 1948, Kik died in a plane crash in France. She was traveling with her new lover, another Protestant, when the plane went down in a storm. She was 28 years old. Her parents did not attend her funeral. The pattern repeating: a child who defied family expectations, who chose personal happiness over family ambition, who paid for that choice with isolation and ultimately with her life. David Kennedy, son of Robert, grew up in the shadow of his father's assassination. He was 12 years old when he watched his father die on television. The trauma of this experience never left him. He struggled with addiction throughout his adolescence and early adulthood. He overdosed on cocaine and prescription drugs in a hotel room in 1984. He was 28 years old, the same age his Aunt Kik had been when she died. Michael Kennedy, another son of Robert, died in a skiing accident in 1997. He was playing football on skis and hit a tree. He was 39 years old. The accident was preventable. The risk was unnecessary, but he took it anyway, because Kennedys take risks, because Kennedys push limits, because the family culture values bravery and adventure over caution and safety. John F. Kennedy Jr., the son of Jack, died in a plane crash in 1999. He was piloting a small plane at night in conditions he was not experienced enough to handle. He had been warned not to fly, but he flew anyway. He crashed into the ocean off Martha's Vineyard, killing himself, his wife, and his sister-in-law. He was 38 years old. The pattern continues across generations. Plane crashes, overdoses, assassinations, accidents that seem less like random misfortune and more like the inevitable result of a family culture that encourages risk-taking, that values courage over caution, that creates people who are driven to prove themselves through increasingly dangerous choices. Why do people believe in the Kennedy curse? Why has this family's misfortune been elevated to the level of mythology? Part of the answer is the sheer number of tragedies. The Kennedy family has experienced more high-profile deaths than would be expected by chance alone. When tragedy strikes once, it is misfortune. When it strikes twice, it is coincidence. When it strikes repeatedly across generations, in different forms but with similar outcomes, people begin to see patterns. But the belief in the curse is not simply about statistics. It is about symbolism. The Kennedy family represents something in American culture: wealth, power, beauty, ambition. They are the closest thing America has to royalty. And when royalty falls, when the powerful are brought low, there is a kind of dramatic satisfaction in that fall. It confirms something that people want to believe: that no one is invulnerable, that ambition carries a price, that the heights are dangerous. The curse narrative also serves a psychological function. It provides an explanation for tragedy that feels meaningful. Random accidents are frightening because they suggest that the universe is chaotic and unpredictable. But a curse, even a metaphorical curse, suggests that there is a pattern, a reason, a logic to the suffering. It is somehow more comforting to believe that the Kennedys are cursed than to believe that terrible things happen for no reason at all. And perhaps there is a kind of truth to the curse narrative, not in any supernatural sense, but in a psychological and sociological sense. The Kennedy family was built on a foundation of relentless ambition, of pushing beyond normal limits, of taking risks that other families would avoid. Joseph Kennedy Sr. created a culture in which his children were driven to achieve at any cost, in which caution was equated with weakness, in which the family mission was more important than individual well-being. This culture, this machinery of expectation and ambition, created people who were psychologically damaged. It created people who took unnecessary risks. It created people who struggled with addiction and depression. It created people who were so driven to prove themselves that they made choices that endangered their own lives. The curse, in other words, is not supernatural. It is structural. It is the inevitable result of a family system that was designed to produce greatness, but that actually produces vulnerability, recklessness, and tragedy. For those Kennedy family members who survived, who lived through the pattern of tragedy without becoming victims themselves, The psychological burden is almost impossible to imagine. Ted Kennedy lived until 2009, dying of brain cancer at age 77. He had outlived 3 of his brothers, had buried more family members than most people bury in multiple generations. He had carried the weight of being the last Kennedy brother, of maintaining the family legacy, of continuing the dynasty despite all evidence that the dynasty was built on unsustainable foundations. His life was marked by the trauma of survival. He struggled with alcoholism. He made terrible decisions. Chappaquiddick, where he drove his car off a bridge and left Mary Jo Kopechne to drown, remains one of the most morally compromised moments in modern political history. He was haunted by his brother's deaths. He was crushed by the weight of expectation, and yet he also achieved remarkable things. He became one of the most effective senators in American history. He championed causes related to healthcare, education, civil rights. He found a way to be useful, to contribute, to make his life mean something beyond simply being the surviving Kennedy brother. Ethel Kennedy, Robert's widow, lived through a level of grief that would have destroyed most people. She raised 11 children alone. She buried a son. She watched the family pattern repeat itself across generations. She maintained her dignity, her faith, her commitment to the causes her husband had championed. She survived by refusing to be broken, by insisting that love and service could coexist with grief. Jacqueline Kennedy, as we explored in the previous episode, found her own way to survive. She remarried. She left the political world. She built a private life that was separate from the Kennedy mythology. She protected her children from the weight of the family name as much as she could. Each of these survivors found their own way to carry the burden, but the burden never fully lifted. They lived always in the shadow of tragedy, always aware that being a Kennedy meant being vulnerable, always wondering when the pattern would reveal itself again. What does it mean to be born a Kennedy? What does it mean to carry a name that is synonymous with both greatness and tragedy? For the younger generations of Kennedys, the grandchildren and great-grandchildren of Joseph Sr., the weight of the name is complicated. There is privilege, certainly. There are doors that open because of the name. There are opportunities that are available because of family connections and inherited wealth. But there is also pressure. There is the expectation that you will achieve, that you will contribute, that you will somehow live up to the legacy of the family members who came before. There is the burden of being constantly compared to Jack or Robert or Ted, of being measured against a standard that was constructed through mythology and selective memory. And there is fear, the rational understanding that the curse is not supernatural, does not eliminate the psychological reality that being a Kennedy seems to correlate with tragedy. When family members die in plane crashes, in skiing accidents, in overdoses, when the pattern repeats across generations, it creates a kind of ambient anxiety. The question is not if tragedy will strike again, but when and who will be next. Some of the younger Kennedys have chosen to embrace the family legacy. They have gone into politics, into public service, into activism. They have used the Kennedy name to champion causes, to fight for justice, to try to make the world better in ways that honor their ancestors. Others have chosen to step away. They have pursued private lives, careers that are disconnected from politics and public service. They have tried to be individuals rather than representatives of a dynasty. They have tried to escape the weight of expectation and the shadow of tragedy. Both choices are valid. Both are, in their own ways, forms of survival. Because being a Kennedy requires navigating a complex psychological landscape where privilege and burden, opportunity and danger, legacy and curse are inseparably intertwined. Is there meaning to the pattern of Kennedy tragedies? Or is it simply a series of unrelated events that we have constructed into a narrative because human beings are pattern-seeking creatures who cannot tolerate the idea of meaningless suffering? The honest answer is that we cannot know. We can analyze the family culture. We can identify the ways that Joseph Kennedy Sr.'s ambition created a system that encouraged risk-taking and discouraged caution. We can trace the psychological damage across generations. We can document the specific choices, the dangerous flight, the experimental mission, the lobotomy, the night drive that ended at Chappaquiddick, that led to tragedy. But we cannot know whether the pattern is inevitable, or whether it is simply a series of terrible coincidences that happen to have befallen the same family. We cannot know whether the Kennedy tragedies reveal something profound about the price of ambition, or whether they are simply what happens when a family that is constantly in the public eye experiences the normal misfortunes that befall all families, but with those misfortunes amplified and mythologized by media attention. What we can say is that the Kennedy story, the rise from immigrant poverty to the pinnacle of American power, the construction of a dynasty, the repeated tragedies that have struck that dynasty, is a deeply American story. It is a story about ambition and its costs. It is a story about the pursuit of greatness and the vulnerability that pursuit creates. It is a story about how families construct mythologies around themselves, and how those mythologies can both elevate and destroy. The Kennedy curse, whether you believe in it or not, whether you see it as supernatural or psychological or simply statistical, has become part of American cultural consciousness. It has become a way of talking about the relationship between power and tragedy, between privilege and suffering, between ambition and its consequences. What the Kennedy family has given America is complex and contradictory. They have given us political leadership, flawed certainly, but also at moments transformative. They have given us cultural influence, the glamour of Camelot, the aesthetic of mid-century American optimism. They have given us activism and public service, generations of Kennedys who have fought for causes related to social justice, healthcare, education. But they have also given us something else. They have given us a sustained meditation on grief, on loss, on what it means to continue in the face of repeated tragedy. They have given us examples of resilience, of people who experienced devastating loss and found ways to continue, to contribute, to make their lives meaningful despite the weight of sorrow. The image that remains most powerful is not the image of triumph, not Jack at his inauguration, not Robert at the Ambassador Hotel, not any of the moments of political glory. The image that endures is the image of Jackie walking behind Jack's casket. It is the image of Ethel Kennedy's face when she learned Robert had been shot. It is the image of Ted Kennedy eulogizing his brothers. It is the image of a family that has been broken repeatedly, but that continues somehow to hold itself together. This is what the Kennedy story ultimately reveals, that grief and resilience are not opposites, but companions. That tragedy does not necessarily destroy. Sometimes it reveals the capacity for endurance that exists within human beings. That a family can experience repeated loss and still find ways to love, to hope, to believe that the future might be different from the past. The Kennedy curse is not a supernatural phenomenon. It is not evidence of cosmic justice or karmic retribution. It is not proof that ambition is always punished or that greatness always carries a terrible price. What it is instead is a pattern that emerges when you combine relentless ambition with risk-taking behavior, when you create a family culture that values achievement over well-being, when you place people in positions of enormous visibility and responsibility without adequate emotional support or psychological preparation. It is a pattern that could have been different. If Joseph Kennedy Sr. had constructed a different kind of family culture, one that prioritized emotional health over political achievement, one that valued caution over risk, one that allowed his children to simply be human rather than constantly performing greatness, the outcomes might have been different. But he did not construct that kind of family. He constructed a dynasty. And dynasties, by their very nature, are unstable. They concentrate pressure. They create vulnerabilities. They transform individual human beings into symbols. And symbols are fragile in ways that ordinary people are not. The Kennedy family has paid an enormous price for their ambition. Some of that price was paid in their own choices. The risks they took, the dangers they courted, the limits they pushed. Some of that price was paid through circumstances beyond their control. The assassins, the accidents, the simple misfortune that strikes all families, but that struck the Kennedys with particular severity. What remains is a family that continues to exist, that continues to contribute, that continues to carry a name that is weighted with both glory and grief. They are still here. The dynasty has not ended. The pattern has not fully run its course. If you were born into the Kennedy family, what would you choose? Would you embrace the legacy, knowing that it comes with enormous pressure and potential danger? Would you pursue public service, knowing that your name makes you both visible and vulnerable? Would you try to honor the memory of those who came before, even though honoring that memory might require sacrifices that you are not sure you are willing to make? Or would you step away? Would you choose obscurity over visibility? Would you build a private life separate from the family mythology? Would you refuse the burden of being a Kennedy and insist on simply being yourself? These are not easy questions. The privilege of being born into wealth and power is real. The opportunities that come with the Kennedy name are extraordinary. But so are the costs. So is the weight of expectation. So is the ambient fear that tragedy will strike again, that the pattern will repeat, that you might be next. And perhaps the deeper question is this: what does the Kennedy story teach us about the relationship between ambition and well-being? About the price of greatness? About the sustainability of dynasty building? About what happens when families prioritize achievement over emotional health? When they value public performance over private authenticity? When they construct systems that produce heroes but damage human beings? Are we, in our own smaller ways, constructing Kennedy-like systems in our own lives? Are we pushing ourselves or our children toward achievement without considering the psychological costs? Are we valuing ambition over well-being, performance over authenticity, image over reality? And if we are, if we recognize something of the Kennedy pattern in our own families, our own choices, our own relationship to ambition and achievement, what might it mean to choose differently? What might it mean to build a life or a family that values survival and happiness as much as it values success? These are the questions that the Kennedy curse, whether you believe in it or not, continues to ask us. These are the questions that make their story not simply a historical curiosity, but a profound meditation on what it means to be human, to pursue greatness, to survive tragedy, and to find meaning in a world that often seems designed to break us.